All right, good morning, everybody. We are on Sadi Aleph. That's today's blot, and we're starting at the two dots. I don't know, 10 lines from the top, give or take. 3, 6, 10, 11, whatever it is. The Ibayalahu. So it'll be pretty clear. We're kind of picking up where we left off at the end of yesterday's daf, which was the Machlokas Rabbi Akiva and Shimon HaTeimani about, do we inspect the murder weapon or do we not? So Ibayalahu. Yesh omed linizakin, o ein omed linizakin. Meaning when a person gets hurt, right, and we're in court and we're trying to decide, damages and stuff like that, do we separately assess if a person only got hurt, not killed, right? Can this weapon that was allegedly used, would it have been able to do this damage or not? And the Gemara kind of explains. Mi amrinan lekatalahu de amdinan bahachi nafki neshama bahachi lo nafki neshama. Aval nezakin kaldu odim aloshna. Meaning, clearly, when it comes to a case of capital punishment, someone says, Reuven killed Shimon. There's no question that Bezdin is going to look at what was allegedly used to commit the murder and say, does it make sense that he was killed because of this thing? Or maybe it was an onus, meaning maybe this thing could never have killed a person. And if the person really died, then I don't know, maybe it's an onus. Maybe that's something that we only do when it comes to Misa. Rashi says he learns from a pasuk that that's something that we do when it comes to Misa. But maybe when it comes to cases of just damages, we don't do that. Meaning, if Adam come and say that guy got injured, then the guy got injured, even if it's far-fetched that this thing was able to injure this person. All right, that's how it goes. Or do we say no? We make the same kind of umdana. We kind of evaluate and say, listen, this thing should not have injured that person, and if it did, I don't know, maybe it's an onus or whatever it is. Tashma. So we're going to bring a series of tashmas, and a lot of these come from earlier in the Masechta. So the first one is from Bar. Ma Bar. So again, this was a brisa that we quoted earlier in the Masechta comparing different types of bars. But the point is, this is really what we need. If a bar was less than 10 tefachim deep, and then a sharo chamar fell into the bar, potter. You're not going to be chayiv for the damages for the killing of a person's shar, but huzakbo chayiv. But if someone gets but if an animal gets hurt in a bar that's less than 10 tefachim, you're going to be chayiv. And this seems like it's a clear raya that when it comes to misa, we very much want to understand. We want to make sure that the thing that caused the misa is something which is able or normal to cause misa. But if it's only damages, then we're really not as concerned. So the Gemara says, "My lab." I mean, you're right. It is weird. Clearly, this raya from bar is animal, exactly. So my lav mi mata lemala kachashiv v'hachi kamar mi tepach v'yada sara mi saleka nizakin ika. The raya from bar, or really the brisa and bar, what it's saying is 10 tefachim. That's what we've assessed can kill something, but anything that less than 10 can't kill, can only create damage. And when we say less than 10, we mean anything less than 10, meaning literally even a tefach. Now a tefach deep bar really shouldn't cause any sort of damage, right? I mean, I don't know, it's a few inches. Right, but the point is, even if it's only a tefach, right, or anything that's less than 10, as long as it causes damages, we don't really ask any questions. Alma linizakin kalduhu shmamina, ain omni linizakin. But the Gemara says no. Lo, it's mimala lemata kachashiv. Vachi kamar asara misa ika, but pachos me'asara purta nizakin isa misa laka. Saying no, you look at it the other way. What it's saying is that 10 can create misa. 10 can cause misa. But when we say anything less than 10, we don't mean literally anything less than 10. We mean slightly less than 10. So 9.5. 9.5 wouldn't cause misa. 9.5 would cause nizakin. But again, 1, you'd have to do a separate shuma. Can 1 create nizakin? I don't know, maybe not. So from this brisa, there's not necessarily a raya either way. Because I can interpret the brisa as saying, again, 10, that we've assumed 10 can create misa. When we say less than 10 can't create misa, can only create nizakin, I don't mean 1. I mean slightly less than 10, 9.5. 9.5, that is enough to potentially create damages, but not misa. Yeah, but olam emalach yesh omer lenizakin. Mechal midi umidi gehechli mitzaka ba beina. So sorry, that was at the end of the last question. That we would do a separate shuma each and every time to determine if this thing is sufficient to create the as tashma, another raya. Hiko al Eno, let's say a person, hits his Eved on his eye, Vesimo, and he blinded him. Oh, Uzno, or he hits him in his ear, V'charshu, and he made him deaf. So Eved Yotzim and Lecheres, this is what we know as an Eved Knani going free, V'shein Ba'ayin. But Keneged Eno, let's say, and Rashi explains, you kind of hit a wall really hard near his eye, V'eno Ro, and that causes this Eved to go blind. Or Keneged Uzno, you hit the wall, and I guess it's near his ear or whatever it is, V'eno Shomea. Ein Eved Yotze Behen Lecheres. So again, if you hit him directly, then he goes free. If you don't do it directly, and it's kind of indirect, then he doesn't go free. My time, it's probably because we have evaluated that if someone hits a wall or something like that near an Eved, that's not sufficient to cause him to lose his eyesight. And if he does, that's kind of not on you. Kamash Malan, that we do this separate sort of even when it only comes to Nizakin.
Keneged, they're explaining as not being on the person's body, but like next to him.
Yeah, so if you look at Rashi, Keneged Eno, Dibur Maskal Keneged Eno, Keneged Eno Shozeh. That's how Rashi explains. But the Gemara says, Rashi is low.
I would think that it.
That's
the
exactly.
Point meaning, hit him in the head, or
it's above my pay grade, right?
I don't know.
But the Gemara says, no. Rashi says no, exactly. The Gemara says, "Lo mishum damrinan hu da abbas nafshe." The Gemara says, no. Don't assume it's necessarily because if you hit the wall, that's not sufficient to create this guy's blindness. No, maybe it is. The problem is that he was we're kind of victim blaming a little bit. We're saying it's really on the Eved because he frightened himself. Meaning it's true that if you hit a wall, can I get someone's eye or something like that, it is sufficient to maybe create blindness, but it's not you doing it all on your own. He is contributing to his own injury by kind of becoming frightened. Kedetanya, Hamavis es Avero. If someone frightens his friend and then he damages himself, you're going to be patrim medini adam, meaning there's some sort of like grama element over here. Ketzad. What's the case? So takaba azno, you shout in someone's ear, or you blow a shofar in someone's ear, the clear show, and then you made him deaf. Pater, but let's say you physically hold on to someone's ear, but takaba azno v'clear show. Hi, so there's a difference if you literally physically touch someone, or you just do the damage in some sort of more indirect fashion, even though, again, what you did clearly could have caused the damage. But so long as kind of his fright contributed to the injury, we can say that you're at least patrim medini adam. Again, it's not recommended to do this, but you're at least patrim medini adam. So again, from the second tashma, we also don't really have a raya either way to our question of when Reuven damages Shimon, does Bezin do a separate like undana to determine if this if the weapon that was used could have caused the injury or not. So Tashma, Chamisha Dvarim, when a person damages another person and you're chayav the Chamisha Dvarim, Omdin Oso V'Nosan Lo Miyad. So we make some sort of evaluation and we make him pay automatically, meaning immediately. Not automatically. We make him pay immediately. So some of these make a lot of sense. So the Tsar, the Nezek, right? Some of those things, the Tsar, the Nezek, I'm missing the fifth one. No. That's the Boshes. Exactly, the Boshes. So the Nezek, the Tsar, and the Boshes, that we know right away. Whenever the injury is, that you can pay. But the Ripoy and the Sheves, when it comes to how long are you going to be in the hospital, right? Or how long are you going to be out of work? That's not something that we necessarily know at the time of the injury. We got to kind of see how this thing plays out. So Ashket Tisrapi, we still make you pay immediately, but better than a some sort of projection. They have to say, like, from this injury, the guy's going to be out of work for 2 weeks. But let's say we did the projection, but unfortunately for this guy, he ends up becoming, worsening, and he ends up being a little bit more sick than we thought he would have been. We still only give him that which we initially projected. So he kind of loses out, right? We thought on January 1st, he's only going to be out of work for 2 weeks. We paid him for 2 weeks. Turns out he's out of work for a month, but we still only give him the 2 weeks. What about the other way around? A Meduhu, let's say we projected 2 weeks, the Hivri, but all of a sudden he's back on his feet after 1 week. Still, no sin low, call Masha Meduhu. It kind of works now in his favor. He's still going to get the full 2 weeks, even though he's only out of work for a week. Shmam, what do we see from here? Yesh omid l'nizakin. Clearly, we make these sorts of projections when it comes to people being hurt. But the Gemara says, what type of, right? We're comparing apples and oranges. Lememed gavra kama liktar mehamaka kama lo miktar lo kama baylan. No one is debating that when a person gets hurt, we're going to have to project what his injuries are, right? Devada yamdinan, right? Hikama baylan. The question that we're dealing with right now is lememed chefza iavad haynis go low. What we're dealing with right now is the weapon, the thing that caused the injury. Can that thing cause the injury? Clearly, when a person gets hurt, we have to do some sort of umdina to see what the damages are. So again, you almost have to understand what the Havmina was, that this would have answered this question. But either way, the Gemara moves on. So what's the answer? Tashma, Shimon Atemani, Omer, Ma Egrof. And this is really why we're bringing this in, because this was the end of yesterday's stop. Shimon Atemani, Omer, Ma Egrof, Miyuchat Shemasr Le'edo Le'edim, Af Kol Miyuchat Shemasr Le'edo Le'edim, Shma Mina, Yesh Omer L'Nizakin, Shma Mina. So the end of yesterday's stop, Shimon Atemani said, just like the Pasuk says, talks about an Egrof or an Eved, like a stone. Just like when a person, right, hits somebody, Bezdin has to look at the fist. The fist can come into court, and Bezdin has to look and assess, can this person's fist have caused this level of injury? So too, any weapon, you have to inspect the weapon and understand, can it have caused the injury? So therefore, it's a very simple answer to our question. It's really just a Mefurja Brisa that we brought at the end of yesterday's daf, and that really answers the question. Okay, so Amar Mar, one of the things that we just said was that if a person gets hurt and Bezdin assessed that he was need, 4 weeks or whatever it is, but then he gets better sooner than that, the victim still gets to keep all of the money. So Amar Amdu Behivri, if we assessed him for, so let's say 4 weeks, Behivri, and he becomes healthy, Nosin lo Kalman She'amadu. We still give him the entire amount that we projected. So Misayele Rava, this is support to what Rava once said. Let's say a person was assessed a full day's worth of, being out of pocket, but halfway through the day he's back, and the kavod of idta, he's a hard worker. He shows up to work for the second half of the day. Still, yavina le we still have to give him the full day. Why? Because we say min shemayu derach me'aleh. Because for whatever reason, Shemayim decided to give him a gift. But the point is, the defendant, right, the guy who hurt him doesn't have a time to say, listen, he wasn't out a full day of work, I should have to pay him a full day of work. That's not how it works. If we assess him as a full day of work, you pay the full day of work, and he just gets the benefit. Okay, going back to the Mishnah gave all sorts of examples of boshes, and one of them was rakak v'higia bo harok, if you spit on someone and the spit lands on his body. So the Gemara is going to make a diak. Amar Papa lo shanu alabo. This halacha is only true if the spit hits you. Big do lo, but if the spit hits your clothing, it doesn't count. The Gemara says why? And have a kibayish with varm. Like why do we? Maybe it's a smaller form of boshes, but the bottom line is it's embarrassing nonetheless. Why do we care how you were embarrassed so long as you're embarrassed? But Amri Maravim Mishpei Rabbi Yosef Maravim also maris bayish with varim patumiklam. No, when it comes to boshes, again. When it comes to boshes, and at least the mominous aspect of boshes, meaning the choshen mishpah part of it, there needs to be physical contact. If you just embarrass someone by using words or by spitting on his clothing, clearly it's an aveira. You're not supposed to do it. But you're not going to owe him the money, the price list that our Mishnah kind of spoke out. Okay, but then the Mishnah said, Hakol lefi kvodo. So first the Mishnah gave us like a price list. If you do this, it's going to be a manaf. This is 100 manaf. It's going to be 200 zuz. And then it says Hakol lefi kvodo. So the Gemara says like this: Tanakama lekula kamar or lechumra kamar. We'll speak it out first, and then the Gemara spells it out. Right? When the Mishnah says 400 zuz for X and Y, is it saying that lekula or lechumra? Is that a minimum or a maximum? Meaning, is the 400 zuz the minimum that someone would have to pay? But akol lefi kvodo, if a person was, maybe a wealthier person, then the price would even be more than 400, or that would be l'chumra, or do you say the 400 was a maximum? And if the person was an ani or whatever it is, then maybe you would pay even less, and therefore the Tanakama was a kula. So let's read it inside. L'kula kamar dika ani delo by l'mishcha kuli high. The 400 in the Mishnah was a maximum, and that the Tanakama is saying l'kula. O dilma l'chumra ka'amar. that really it's l'chumra. The 400 is a minimum. Dika ashir d'var l'misa l'tzvei. And if the person that was embarrassed is an ashir, then maybe you'd have to give him more. So tashma, it's a very hard tashma, but we're going to prove from the seifa of the Mishnah that one way or the other. So let's just go through the Gemara's going to do this anyway in a second. So let's just go through outside the hemshech of the Mishnah. So Rabbi Kiva said it's he argued with the Tanakama, and he said, "Afilu banim shevi Yisrael, they get treated like a shir or whatever it is." And then he told a story. So what was the story that the Mishnah talked about? We had a person that uncovered a woman's hair in the shuk, and Rabbi Kiva said, "You owe her 400 zuz." Then he had this whole scheme, right? And he basically said, "I'm going to wait, and when I see this lady, I'm going to spill some oil. She's going to undo her own hair, and then she's going to go take the oil and put it in her own hair." But what's the bottom line? Rabbi Akiva said in that story, the guy was Mechayev 400, and Rabbi Akiva, this Rashi adds this point, in that story, the lady was an Aniyah. So the Gemara says like this, Tashma, Midika Amar Rabbi Akiva, Afilu Aniyim Shabi Yisrael, Rowan Osan Kilu Hein B'nei Chorin, Shiyardu Menachsem Shem B'nei Avram Yitzchak B'Yakov, that Rabbi Akiva holds that even a wealthier person, meaning even an ani, is viewed like a wealthier person. And still, Rabbi Akiva said that in this case, you're only chayav 400. Shma mina, Tanakama, Lakula Ka'amar, Shma mina. So Rabbi Akiva is arguing on the Tanakama, and he says that even when the person is a wealthier person, you pay 400. That proves that the Tanakama would say that the maximum is 400. Meaning, because Rabbi Akiva was saying that the minimum is 400. So Kamashman, the Tanakam would be saying that the maximum is 400, and therefore, again, so that's how we kind of answer the question. It's a bit of a convoluted back and forth, but again, the question was, the Tanakama, when this price list of 400, is that a minimum or a maximum? And we've kind of proven from the Hemshech of the Mishnah that based on Rabbi Akiva's response to the Tanakama viewed the 400 as more of a maximum, not a minimum. Okay. So now we back to our story. And again, the guy said to Rabbi Akiva said, "You owe 400." And the guy said, "Can you give me a little bit of time?" And Rabbi Akiva said, "Sure, I'll give you some time." Oh, maybe this is random. Maybe this is the time. So either way, so this Gemara says, "Umiya vinan zman." A little technical question on the whole story. Rabbi Akiva gave the guy zman to repay, or not to repay, to pay this woman the damages. But the Gemara says, as a general matter, do we ever give a defendant time to pay the plaintiff? We don't give time. So the Gemara says, no. When the victim is out of pocket, that's when we're never going to give the defendant time to repay the victim. When it only comes to Boshes, Mamona, Yavina. When it only comes to Boshes and no one's out of pocket, then we will allow a little bit more time to repay the victim. So Shamra, so the guy waited until she was until the right opportunity struck. But the Gemara says, Vahatanya, we have another brisa. So what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said that ultimately Rabbi Akiva said to the guy, he said, listen, you're not allowed to be choval yourself. But if you do, you're still going to be patur. That was Rabbi Akiva said to this gentleman. We have another version of the story in a brisa where Rabbi Akiva's language was a little bit different. So Vatanya, we have a brisa, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Salalta b'mayim adirim ve'alisa cheres biyadecha. That's a phrase. What he basically said was, you went diving in these choppy waters looking for like a pearl, right? You thought you had this whole plan, but you came up with just broken pottery. The point is, your whole scheme didn't work. But then Rabbi Akiva said, because Adam Rashai Lechala Ba'atzmo, because this woman, she's allowed to damage herself. But the point is, we have a bit of a stira between our Mishnah and this brisa. Our Mishnah said a person is not allowed to be chovel himself, but even if you do, you're patur. And in the brisa, Rabbi Akiva made it sound like you are allowed to damage yourself. So which one is it? Are you allowed to damage yourself? Are you not allowed to damage yourself? So I'm a Rabba, lo kasha, kama chabala, kama boshes. In one case, we're dealing with actual chabala, and in one case, we're dealing with boshes. When it comes to boshes, you are allowed to damage yourself. When it comes to chabala, you're not allowed to damage yourself. But the Gemara says, what type of answer is this? Both the Mishnah and the Brisa are dealing with the exact same story. They were both dealing with the case of boshes. So how are you saying that the difference in the stories is one is boshes, one is chabala? It's not true. They're both boshes. Right? The Gemara says, "Hachi Kamala." This is how you need to read our Mishnah. Lo mebaya boshes to Adam rasha levayish atzma. It's clear that this woman, when she took her head covering off her head, she was allowed to do that because that's only boshes. Ela afilu chavola. Rabbi Kiva is just trying to make a point. Even if it came to proper chavola of damaging yourself, the ein Adam rasha lechavol ba'atzmo still acherim shechavlu bo chayavin. So we'll kind of wiggle out of this answer by just kind of editing our Mishnah a little bit to add in to make it make sense that Rabbi Kiva's line was talking about Chavola and not Poshes. But the Gemara says, so the Ein Adam Rasha L'Chaval Ba'atzmo. So you're telling me right now that a person is not allowed to injure himself. Tani, we have a brisa, and this was a brisa in Mesecha Shavuos, and it's dealing with the context of a Shavuos bitui. So we're familiar, right, where the person makes a shvua and you have to follow through with whatever your shvua is. What if you make a shvua on something that you're not allowed to do or you can't do, right? So let's say I make a shvua to, I don't know, violate some mitzvah or something like that. So maybe the shvua doesn't take effect, and that's kind of what this Bryce is dealing with. So yachol nishba laharaba atzmo. Maybe I would think that if I made a shvua that I would damage myself velo hara, and then I didn't go through with it. Yehi pater, maybe I will think that that's not a valid shvua. But Talmud Lomar lahara o lehetiv. There's a hekesh in the pasuk contrasting doing good and doing bad. Mahatava, just like when I make a shvua to do something good, rishus, I have the ability to do it. Avhara rishus, so too, I can make a shvua to damage myself. I have the rishus to do that. So avi nishba la rabba atzmo velo heira, that I will actually be chai. But the point is, from this Bryce, it's very clear that I am allowed to be chovel ba'atzmo. I am allowed to harm myself. So what are you telling me that I'm not allowed to harm myself? From this Bryce and Shavuos, it very much sounds like I am allowed to harm myself. But Amar Shmuel, Shmuel says, what type of question is this? There's a difference between harming myself and injuring myself, right? Amar Shmuel, be'eshe b'tainis. Maybe the shvua that I'm making is that I'm going to sit and I'm going to fast. We're allowed to fast. We fast a bunch of times a year, right? So that's harming myself. At the same time, I'm not injuring myself. So I can harm myself as long as as long as the shvua is that I'm going to fast. I just can't injure myself. But the Gemara says the Kavasah, it's a lengthy brisa. There's a lot of different cases. And if you're telling me that when the brisa talks about harming oneself, it's only dealing with fasting, how do I understand the rest of the brisa? Because Kavasah, Gabi Haras Acherim, there's other cases dealing with me harming others. Lo Shiva Metinus, you're telling me that when I harm others, I'm just putting them in a tinus. How do I make other people sit in a time? I mean, I can damage other people. That clearly I can do. How do I make other people fast? Mar says, what's the problem? I just lock them up in a closet. Meaning all I have to do is kidnap them, and then I will put them in a fast, right? So what's the problem? The Gemara continues, Vahatanya, but another part of this brisa says, Ezehu haras acherim. What is an example of damaging others? Akeploni, hit him, mocho, I hit him really hard on his head, right? So the point is the brisa is really explicit that when it comes to harming others, it's not just making them fast. It's literally harming them. It's injuring them. So too, the case of injuring myself, harming myself, wouldn't be a case of a fasting. It would be actually injuring myself. And from here, we see that a person is allowed to injure himself. So again, our question is, how can you tell me that Rabbi Kiva is saying that a person is not allowed to be chovel ba'atzmo? We see from this brisa and Shavuos that a person is allowed to be chovel ba'atzmo. So the Gemara falls off on its original answer, and it says, Ella Tanai. You'll have to say that it's really a machlokas tanaim. There are some that hold that you are not allowed to be chovel ba'atzmo. And there are others that hold that you are allowed to be chovel ba'atzmo. And just to speak out, our stira between the Mishnah and the Brisa was both Rabbi Akiva. So sometimes you say, oh, it's machlokas tanaim, and I don't know, some guys say this and some guys say this. Here, Rabbi Akiva is saying both. So what it becomes clear in the Gemara, what Tosfos speaks out, is that these are just two different Tanaim, Al-Liba Rabbi Akiva. So both the Mishnah and the Brisa aren't Rabbi Akiva himself. It's different Talmidim saying Al-Liba Rabbi Akiva. So the Gemara says, so now we're going to try to find this Tana who says that it's usher to injure yourself. So who is this Tana? Tana. Maybe it's the following Tana. Who? Titania, Ba'ach es dimchem l'nafsho seichem edrosh. This is a pasuk in Noach. This is Noach just got out of the Teva. And Hashem is telling him you're allowed to like eat animals and stuff like that. And the pasuk shot of this pasuk is that you are not allowed to murder people. But Rebbe Lazar Omer miyad nafshosechem edrosh estimchem, that he had a drasha that he learned this pasuk to say that you're not allowed to commit suicide. So maybe what the Gemara is saying is maybe it's this Tana who holds that the pasuk says you're not allowed to commit suicide. You're also not allowed to harm yourself. The Gemara says, I mean, maybe I'm allowed to hurt myself, and I'm not allowed to kill myself, right? So from this brisa, we haven't really seen a Tana that says you're not allowed to hurt yourself. Granted, he says you're not allowed to kill yourself, but maybe killing yourself and hurting yourself are two different things. Ella haitana, Tanya, mikaran ala mace. You're allowed to tear kriya on a mace, which of course is what we do. But and below midarke amori, and that's not considered something that's darke amori. And Amar Rabbi Lazar, Shemati, I heard Shemikar ala mace yosemidai, that if someone tears kriya more than necessary, meaning I don't know what that means, but maybe you tear your entire garment, whatever it is, loka, you get malchus mishum baltash, because you're wasting your entire beged. Now, if he's so concerned about a beged, kol shekain gufo. So he's also going to be concerned, clearly, kol shekain, about harming yourself. And maybe this is the Tana that says that you're not allowed to damage yourself. But again, the Gemara pushes this off, and it says, "V'dilma begadim shiny, dipseda delo haderhu." Maybe I'll tell you that damaging your clothing is even worse than injuring yourself, because clothing you can't repair. At least when you injure yourself, you heal. Sometimes. Kihad Rav Yochanan, like we have a story with Rav Yochanan, Kari Lamani Mechabadusa. He would call his clothing some name. Mechabadusa is like, he would honor his clothing, because again, he felt that clothing are very important. Rav Chizda, another story with Rav Chizda, Hava Maski Beni Hizmi Behiga, when Rav Chizda was walking through thorns, things that would rip up his clothing, Madli Luhula Ma'ani, he would lift up his pants, whatever it is. And Amar, he said, listen, if the thorns scrape up my legs will heal. But if they scrape up my clothing is going to rip, and they're not going to heal. But again, the point is we've seen examples where sometimes people thought it was more important to not rip up your clothing than necessarily your person. So again, we still haven't found this Tana that says that it's usher to hurt yourself. Elahai Tanahu, Netanya, a very kind of a famous Gemara. If we go back to our Nazir days, Amar Rav Eliezer Hakaper Beribi, Mata Malomer V'chipar Lav Me'asher Chata Al HaNefesh V'chi Be'ezen Nefesh Chata Zeh. Right, this is kind of like the question: why does the Nazir have to bring a chatas? What sin did he do? Ela Shetzir Ato Mina Yain, that he precluded himself. He denied himself the pleasure of wine. This Nazir, all he did was he was mitzayer himself from drinking wine and nikra chote, and still he's considered a chote, ha-mitzayer atzon we call davar, someone else who denies himself or who injures himself or whatever it is. So now we found our Tana that says that it is usher to harm yourself. And then we'll just try to get to the Mishnah. So the last line of the Mishnah talked about
an accident doesn't count.
An accident doesn't count, exactly. The last line of the Mishnah was if you cut down your trees, again, it's baltashkas, it's also usher to do. So Tani Rabba Bar Chana made to Rav. So Rabba Bar Chana was once teaching a brisa to Rav, and he said, this is what the brisa said. Shori Yarak, the guy comes in a bezdin, he says, you killed my shar, Nitiosi Katsasu, you cut down my tree, and therefore you owe me money. And let's assume the guy's got like Adim, right? It's like a real claim. You owe me money, I have Adim, you damaged my thing. And the other guy responds, what are you talking about? You told me to kill the shar. You told me to cut down the tree. Potter, and that's what the brisa ends. That's a valid claim. So Amar Lay, Rav says back to Rabbi Barachana, Imkin, Lashafkas Chaya Libriasa, call to me name, like that's it. Like you got this whole claim in court, and the guy comes in, he's like, well, you told me to, and that's it, Potter. So it doesn't sound like it, right? So Amar Lay, so Rabbi Barachana says back to Rav, Asmiya, so should I just like delete this brisa? Like, is it just a bad brisa? Amar Lay, no, let's not, maybe it's not a bad brisa, let's try to understand it a little bit. Look, to target Masnisach, maybe we can understand the brisa in the following case. Bishara Ome Laharigo, Bilana Ome Lakatzitza. Right? We're dealing with a shar that doesn't have any value, because let's say it was a shar that was Ome Lahariga. Maybe it was a shar that killed a person, and therefore there was a Gemartin, and therefore there's no value to the shar. Rashi says with a tree, maybe it's in a Sheira, right? Maybe it's Tabot Zara, or there's some other reason why it was necessary for it to be cut down. But Yahachi, right? So how does this answer the question? So it's one thing if a guy's coming into Bez and he's saying, you owe me for killing my shard, you owe me $1,000. It's another thing if the shard doesn't have any value. So if the shard doesn't have any value, then maybe it's a valid claim for the guy to say, listen, you told me to do it. I don't know, right? It's not that big of a deal anyway. We're not dealing with a lot of money right here. Yeah, exactly. But the Gemara says, Yihachi, my katayin. So why are we even in court, right? If this shard doesn't have any value because it was supposed to be killed, why is Reuven even saying, Shimon, you owe me money? Right? So Anna Lemevar HaMitzvah. They are arguing over who had the right to do the mitzvah. If the shar needed to be killed, then killing it is a mitzvah. And what the guy is coming into court to say is, you stole my mitzvah, and therefore you owe me a small amount of money for this mitzvah. The Tanya B'Shavach B'Chisa, the pasuk is talking about kisui adam. So when you shech certain animals, you have to do kisui adam. But the Gemara says, Misha Shapach Yichasha. There's a mitzvah for the person who does the shechita. He's the one that should do the kisui adam. There was a story where a person did the shechita, someone else comes and covers the blood. And Rabbi Gamliel was mechayev him to give us, some amount of money for stealing the mitzvah. And that's really what's going on over here in court. A guy comes into court, he says, listen, I had a shar, I was supposed to kill it, I want to do the mitzvah. You came in, you ran it and did it. You owe me a smaller amount of money. I guess it's a valid claim to say you literally told me to shech your animal, and we would believe you, and that would be it. Okay. But just to finish up a few loose ends before we get to the Mishnah. So Amar Rav, and this is it's interesting that it's here towards the end of Baba Kama, but this is, I think we're probably familiar with the halacha that you're not allowed to cut down a fruit tree, right? I think this is one of the Gemaras that deal with it. So Amar Rav, Dikla, Mutayin Kaba, if you have a tree that has a calf's worth of dates, asur limiktzitze, you're not allowed to cut it down. Meisvei, how many olives should be on the tree, and you can't cut it down, rova. It's only a rova kav. So you just told me it was a full kav. No, I don't think so. I think it's a fruit tree. Yeah, I don't think so.
If it's a fruit tree, but you're saying there's a certain amount that has to be on it.
Well, probably means even in its healthiest stage.
Okay.
But the point is, you just told me that the amount is a kav, and from this Bryce, that sounds like it's only a rova kav. Gemara says shiny zaysim, the chajib. Zaysim are different than dates. Zaysim are more valuable, and therefore even a rova of a kav is enough. When it comes to dates, it would need to be a full kav. Amar Rab Chanina, this is a tough line to read. Lo shachav shivchas bri ela dekitz tenisa below zmana. My son, whose name was Shivchas, I guess, he died because he didn't follow this halacha, right? He cut down a tree when he wasn't supposed to. Amar Ravina, ve'im haya me'ula b'damim mutter. So a little fine print. If the lumber was very valuable, which is interesting because a year or two ago, lumber shot up and down. So if the lumber is so valuable, then it totally is more valuable than the fruit itself, then you're allowed to cut down the special dispensation. You are allowed to cut down the tree for the wood. These are a brisa to support this. So this is a pasuk that is in Parsha Shoftim. It's talking about when you're besieging a city and you need to cut down trees to help in the war effort, right? So which trees should you cut down? The pasuk says, "Rak eitz ashar teida kilo eitz ma'achal hu oso sashta." Cut down the tree that you know isn't the fruit tree. But the Gemara is going to darshan, and we're going to see there's some fine print. So Tananam Yahachi, Rak eitz ashar teida. When the pasuk says Rak eitz ashar teida, zet ilon ma'achal, that's actually referring to a fruit tree. Meaning there are times when you can cut down a fruit tree. Kilo eitz ma'achal. What does the pasuk mean when it says, and you know it's not a fruit tree? Who zet Elon struck? That's dealing with a tree that's not a fruit tree, that you're allowed to cut that one down. But the Gemara says, once you're telling me that when it's all said and done, you can cut down any tree. So why are you even telling me that you have to know that there are certain trees that, meaning why are you telling me that I'm allowed to cut down trees that have no fruit, and I'm allowed to cut down trees that have fruit? Once you tell me I can cut down all the trees, so then why do I need these two different drushes? Gemara says lahaktim srak lamachal. It's to teach you that again, there's a precedence, there's an ordering. If you can avoid cutting down the tree with fruit, so then first cut down the tree that doesn't bear fruit, and then cut down the tree that has fruit. Turn the page. You would think that this ordering makes sense and it applies even if the fruit tree is very, very expensive, meaning not the fruit, but the bark is very, very expensive. Tamaloma rock, and that's really what we need. Tamalomar, the Gemara says, the word rock says no. If you have even a fruit tree, but again, we're dealing with like a war effort. You're trying to siege a city and you need to cut down trees and stuff like that. If you have a tree that's a fruit tree, but the bark is very, very expensive and it would be very, very useful in your war effort, then you can even cut down that tree first. Thank you, Randy. You can even cut down that tree first. And which again, it supports our view that even if you have a fruit tree, if the bark is very expensive, or the lumber is very expensive, you are allowed to cut it down. Shmuel, just 2 stories, and then we'll get to the Mishnah. Shmuel, Isilea, Risei Tam, Ray Shmuel, sharecropper, once gave him some dates, and Achli, Taimu, Tam, Batachamra, and it tasted a little like wine. So Amarle, my high, why did the dates taste like wine? So Amarle, Baini, Gufni, Kaimi, because I guess this tree, the roots, whatever it is, they kind of got mixed up with the vineyard. And that's why they have a little taste of wine. So Amar Maklashi Bechamra Kulihai, that's really bad. The dates are kind of destroying the value of if it's taking up some of the nutrients from the vines, that's going to ruin the wine. And Lamachar Aislam Kurayu, meaning tomorrow uproot this whole thing. Because the wine is much more expensive than these dates. So I don't want the dates ruining my wine. Rav Chisda, similar story. Chazla Tali Begufni, I guess you saw same idea that there was dates or whatever, palms, it mixed with the wine. So Amalei Laurisi Akarinu Gufni, meaning rip it all up, take out the dates, because Gufni Kani Dikni, because with my grapes, with as long as I have a good vineyard, I can always buy more palm trees. I can always buy more date palms. But to Kali Lokani Gufni, but with my dates, I can't buy the vines. Meaning the vines are much more valuable than the dates. And if the two are mixing up, then I'm going